This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
World Health Organization announces discovery of 2 effective Ebola treatments. What does it mean for the DRC? Cuba's comprehensive health program bears fruit in reducing cancer cases. And Muslim pilgrims take part in the storming of the devil, the last ritual of Hajj. Hello and welcome to CGTN. This is Africa Live and I'm Karen Roberts in Nairobi. Also coming up in the programme. In business, Nigeria warns local banks not to enforce insurance on borrowers. And in sports, Nigeria's taekwondo team looking to win big at the African Games in Morocco. We start with some good news, and Ebola may soon be a preventable and treatable disease. That's according to the World Health Organization. The announcement came after 2 drugs tried on patients in the Democratic Republic of Congo proved highly effective. 4 drugs were trialled on dozens of patients, but only 2 showed high survival rates. Developed using antibodies harvested from survivors of Ebola, the 2 drugs work by attacking the virus with antibodies, neutralizing its impact on human cells. Well, according to the research, more than 90% of infected people can survive if treated early with these drugs. The drugs are at a first in what the WHO says is a scientifically sound study. They'll now be used to treat all Ebola patients in the DR Congo. Well, for more on this breakthrough in the fight against Ebola, we are now joined by CGTN's Chris Ochemringa in Kinshasa for us. Chris, this appears to be a huge breakthrough and the trials were conducted in DRC. What has been the reaction so far in the country? Okay, sorry, I'll repeat that question, Chris. It seems we're having difficulty there. This is a huge breakthrough, as we were saying earlier, and the trials, of course, were conducted in the DRC. What has been the reaction so far in the country? I'm terribly sorry, we have lost connection there. We'll see if we can get Chris Ochemringa a little bit later in the programme. Meanwhile, let's talk about the timeline. It's been more than 5 years now since the recent Ebola outbreak was discovered. CGTN's Daniel Arapmoy looks at the spread of the disease and the medical interventions.
The Ebola outbreak from 2014 to 2016 was the largest outbreak since the virus was discovered and became known as the West Africa Ebola epidemic. It was widespread in Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. Now, the most recent Ebola outbreak is currently happening in the Democratic Republic of the Congo's provinces of North Kivu and Ituri. Now, this Ebola outbreak has already claimed more than 1,700 lives. What makes this particular Ebola outbreak especially difficult to combat is that it is in conflict-affected areas, which has made it dangerous to access the affected people. This has resulted in this Ebola outbreak becoming the largest outbreak in DRC's history. World Health Organization declared the Ebola outbreak in DRC a public health emergency of international concern. Before 2014, West African countries had never experienced an Ebola outbreak, and they were unprepared for the disease. The world saw how fast Ebola can spread in an urban center without preparation. Now, many Ebola cases have been linked to traditional burial and funeral practices, which brings family and friends of the deceased in contact with the virus. A new collaborative study was identified and studied Ebola antibodies that could be used to design universal therapeutics that are effective against many different Ebola species. The World Health Organization decided to narrow an experiment with Ebola patients to 2 treatments that show real promise. Now, the current Ebola outbreak in the DRC is considered the 2nd largest in history, killing at least 1,700 people. Violence in the region has limited efforts to fight the outbreak. Back to you.
The Ebola virus has caused panic in DRC's Bukavu, which is opposite Goma on the other side of Lake Kivu. Local government has stepped up measures to prevent the disease from entering the city, such as checking body temperatures of travellers and the use of correct disinfection processes.
The Ebola control work in the Democratic Republic of Congo has made certain progress in the past year, but still faces grave difficulties due to local disorder. In July this year, the disease spread to Goma, with 4 people confirmed infected in the densely populated city close to the Rwandan border.
We launched an Ebola emergency response mechanism in Bukavu under the management of a coordination center. The most important thing at present is to control the flow of people. There are about 1,500 people who travel from Goma to Bukavu via Lake Kivu. We have set up checkpoints to examine the travelers upon their arrivals and check their body temperatures. If any of them is found with suspicious symptoms, we will immediately quarantine them to prevent an Ebola outbreak in Bukavu.
The government measures have not only helped with the disease prevention, but have gone a long way in also relieving people's fear.
All the people are struggling to prevent Ebola from spreading into our province. I heard that many places have launched emergency response mechanisms, so people gradually calmed down and are not as scared as before.
However, political unrest in the country and the military conflicts in some regions have affected the Ebola control efforts and triggered threats of attacks on Ebola prevention staff. Scared of the armed conflicts and the Ebola outbreak, some residents of the affected regions have fled to nearby provinces, further hampering control work.
The problem of Ebola is very complicated, as the situation of the affected area is quite complex, with fierce armed conflicts and insecurity. ADF, an armed group of Ugandan origin, has committed many atrocities in the area, especially in Beni, which makes the response mechanism hard to take effect.
Since August 1st, 2018, the disease has claimed over 1,800 lives, according to the World Health Organization, which recently declared the Ebola outbreak a public health emergency of international concern. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
To other news, staying with health matters, officials with the World Health Organization say cancer is one of the major killer diseases in Cuba. Every year, thousands of people die of cancer on the island. In response, Cuba put in place a comprehensive plan more than a decade ago. And as CGTN's Luis Chirino reports, there's been progress.
In Cuba, where cancer is the second leading cause of death after cardiovascular disease, patients have access to a comprehensive cancer control program.
Primary healthcare allows early cancer diagnosis first. Then we provide patients with the best treatment by using all resources: surgery, chemo and radiation therapies, and even pharmaceutical drugs produced by our own scientific centers.
Simavax is a Cuban patented drug aimed at preventing the recurrence of lung cancer. It helps the body generate its own immune system in a way that starves the cancer and stops it from growing. The vaccine has been administered to thousands of Cubans and could benefit many U.S. patients through the first joint U.S.-Cuba biotechnology venture set up last year for clinical trials.
We have some very unique cancer medicines of Cuban origin that have been developed by the Center for Molecular Immunology that could truly benefit and impact U.S. cancer patients.
Cuban doctors say treatment has been successful despite hurdles posed by the U.S. trade embargo.
This equipment is used for radiation treatment, but some of it is broken. We've kept it in boxes because we have no access to spare parts from the U.S.
Nelsa Romero has uterine cancer. She's undergoing radiation treatments.
Everything here is marvelous. I don't have to pay a single cent for this treatment. Both doctors and nurses treat us so well in this hospital.
According to Dr. Rubio, in Cuba, where cancer killed more than 2,000 people last year, lung cancer ranks first, followed by breast and colon cancer in women and prostate and colon cancer in men. Cuba has also taken its cancer treatment to other nations.
Nearly all countries of the world have received the help of Cuban doctors. In the field of cancer, we've been to Africa, Angola, Ethiopia, South Africa. We have assisted patients there, and we have trained doctors to help fight cancer on the continent.
Experts say that some 40% of all cancer cases in the world could be avoided by reducing key risk factors like unhealthy lifestyles, because the best antidote against cancer is prevention. Luis Chirino, CGTN, Havana.
Let's now take you to Mecca in Saudi Arabia, where Muslim pilgrims took part in the final Hajj ritual called the Stoning of the Devil. This event comes after 2 days of intense prayer. Here's Laura Walubengo with the story.
In the searing heat of Mecca, they walk. They are drawn from different nationalities, race and creed. It is a walk that will culminate in a very important final ritual that forms Muslims' pilgrimage to Mecca, the stoning of the devil. Before this, 2 days of intense prayers were held in the Hijazi city in Mina while facing the cube called the Kaaba. Prayers that are meant to spiritually prepare the faithful to face and symbolically stone the devil. The Kaaba is considered as Islam's most important place, called the House of God. During the stoning exercise, each pilgrim is given 7 pebbles, which they throw at a special pillar representing the devil. Previous tragic cases where thousands of pilgrims died from stampedes and suffocation were reported. One of the worst tragedies to befall pilgrims in Mecca happened in 2015, when 2,300 pilgrims were crushed to death. Now, as worshippers engage in the final ritual of the pilgrim, security officers keep a watchful eye. This year, Mecca received almost 2.5 million pilgrims from across the world. Ritual over and done, worshippers trickle out of the venue as light rains come down. The pilgrimage to Mecca is one of the pillars of Islam. It requires all able Muslims to undertake this trip at least once in their lifetime. For the rest of the Muslims across the world, Eid ul-Adha is coming to an end. It is a festival of slaughtering and sharing. Laura Walubengo, CGTN.
Let's now return to our top story, and that is the good news that Ebola may soon become a preventable and treatable disease. That's according to the World Health Organization. We can now return to Chris Ochemringa, who is in Kinshasa in DRC for us. Chris, this seems like it's a huge breakthrough. The trials, as we know, were conducted in DRC. There are now 2 drugs that appear to be successful. What has been the reaction in the country?
Well, there's been lots of excitement by Congolese officials and people from North Kivu and Ituri, where this outbreak has been raging since August last year. People are very optimistic that now they have got these 2 drugs that have been found to be 90% effective in treating Ebola patients. They will be cured of this very deadly disease that, you know, has frightened very many Congolese in the east and even in the western part of the city, because they fear that this outbreak may spread here and cause problems. And so there's a lot of joy. I spoke to the head of the DRC's Ebola response, Professor Jean-Jacques Muyembe, who happens to be one of the doctors who investigated the very first Ebola outbreak way back in 1976, and he was elated. He said this is what he's been waiting for all this time. He's a 77-year-old who's been engaged in a lot of research about Ebola, and so he's very happy and optimistic that not only this outbreak will be brought to an end, but also future outbreaks will now be, dealt with very effectively with these new drugs that have been discovered.
So, Chris, some good news there with this breakthrough in treating Ebola. But as we know, there are still problems in DRC with the treatment not being done early enough, and also there's a general distrust with medical practitioners. Do you think that this breakthrough is likely to change attitudes in the DRC?
Well, I think it will change attitudes, because if people see their neighbors, their colleagues, being cured of this very dreadful disease, then they will start taking their people, to the professional healthcare workers for treatment. Because the problem has been, the DRC Health Ministry says about 40% of people in North Kivu and Ituri prefer to go to traditional healers, religious leaders, or just stay at home. And so that has been the big problem that they've been facing. And so if people see locals in their community being treated, I think it will help in making them go for treatment early and getting cured of this very deadly disease.
And Chris, finally, let's talk about the authorities in DRC. How are they likely to ensure that Ebola patients do receive these drugs early enough?
So the authorities have decided to work with all the influential people in North Kivu and Ituri. That's religious leaders, opinion leaders, people who were seen as celebrities in the communities, to send out this message that it's critical that people who get infected with this very deadly disease go for treatment early, so that they're well taken care of, and so that the disease does not spread across the neighborhood and in the country at large. And so these people have been recruited to work with the international healthcare workers and the Congolese authorities to spread this message that it's very important for them to get treated at healthcare centers where there are professionals who will give them the right treatment and get so that they get cured. And so that's the strategy that they're going to be doing over the next 6 months, working with more locals to send the message across to the people in North Kivu and Ituri province.
Okay, thank you very much for that update. That was CGTN's Chris Ochenringa there in Kinshasa on this breakthrough in the treatment of Ebola, 90% success rate. We are going to a short break now. Don't go away, lots more to come, including French troops face intense heat of Mali and the silence of villagers as they search for jihadists. And delicately made, affordable and enjoyable, the story of Tunisia's date palm juice.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
In Hong Kong, the region's chief executive, Carrie Lam, says the violence will push Hong Kong onto a path of no return. She made the comments in a weekly news briefing. CGTN's Judan has more.
She said the violence will put Hong Kong's future in danger.
Hong Kong society has become insecure, unstable and violent. Violence, especially serious violence, will push Hong Kong to a path of no return. It will put Hong Kong society in a very anxious, dangerous situation.
Carrie Lam also said a lot of Hong Kong people are worried that if they can continue their normal life right now. And secondly, she said, the violence is putting Hong Kong's rule of law in danger as well.
The violence is damaging to Hong Kong's rule of law. This is what we are most concerned about. The rule of law is the most important of Hong Kong's core values. If it's violated, many other areas of society will also be affected.
And thirdly, she said the police officers are facing huge pressure right now because the police and their families are facing online bullying, and the police officers' dormitories were destroyed by protesters, and this is totally unacceptable. And she's calling for the people the Hong Kong people to restore the social order as soon as possible. Well, what I want to say is that this morning, Carrie Lam just burst into tears about the current situation and is calling for again and again to restore the social order as soon as possible.
Meanwhile, Hong Kong police have again called for social order to be restored. The call came during a press conference on Tuesday in response to the increasing tensions between the police and protesters.
It's only because someone has broken the law that the police have to enforce the law. Many innocent citizens and even visitors of Hong Kong have been unfairly affected by protesters' reckless actions. I hope the public will understand that the police use force only as a means to containing the violent situations, and we always use force with restraint. We never wish to see any injury or casualties. If you still believe in peaceful, rational, and non-violent expression of speech, I appeal to you to cut ties with all rioters. We appeal to you to not let violence become a new norm. Please join us in restoring the order of society.
Well, Hong Kong police have come under fire over their handling of the current crisis. So is their response heavy-handed in the present circumstances? Our next report takes a look.
On July the 14th, in a major clash with the police in a shopping mall, one of the rioters, a 22-year-old college graduate, bit off the finger of a police officer. The attacker made bail 2 days later with only a restraining order to stay away from potential protest locations. Despite prosecutors' strong request, he be detained. The officer was hospitalized. Doctors say they have reattached the finger, but there may be permanent nerve damage. The chief inspector of Hong Kong police earlier told CGTN that some Western media is demonizing law enforcement officers, when actually police are exercising great restraint.
They are only showing to the public that what the police is doing, only videoing all the police actions. They will never show the public what the other side is doing. I think it is fair to us.
Pressure has not only come from media, but also from an earlier case in which officers were sent to prison for fighting back. In February 2017, 7 police officers were found guilty of assaulting a protester during the 2014 Occupy Central movement. The officers were sentenced to 2 years each in prison. The protester, who poured urine on police officers and resisted arrest, was found guilty but only jailed for 5 weeks. The verdict caused widespread anger as the public believed the court gave too heavy a penalty to the officers who said they were only defending themselves.
Compared to other international law enforcement agencies, Hong Kong police are the only law enforcement agencies using so constrained levels of force. We have not used any live ammo. The only level of force or weapons that we have used were OC foam, rubber rounds, and super shock rounds. They are non-lethal.
Hong Kong law says clearly that any assault on police officers on duty can incur a maximum of 2 years in prison. But police officers say that under the city's judicial system, based on case law, the lesser sentences being passed by judges on some protesters can put great pressure on police in the field. They point out that many of Hong Kong's judges hold foreign citizenship. Chief Inspector Nu gets a bit emotional when he says the police are the ones being bullied now.
It is a kind of bullying, right, to the police officers who tried their best to protect Hong Kong. But in return, they have been bullied on social media. Their personal particulars were shown to the public on website, or even, right, the school teachers bully their children if they know the children's parents were, well, police officers. This is totally unacceptable.
CGTN.
Protesters are gathering again at Hong Kong International Airport. Earlier today, the airport authority issued a statement saying that it will work to rearrange flights cancelled due to demonstrations. More than 200 flights have been cancelled or delayed. Major protests have been taking place at the airport since Friday. Hundreds of demonstrators dressed in black occupied the arrivals area, leaving only narrow paths for travellers to pass through. The cancellations left tens of thousands of passengers stranded. On Monday, one Australian passenger said he was blocked and disturbed by radical young protesters. He said Hong Kong is part of China and he feels Hong Kong police are exercising restraint to restore stability.
What we can do is for a journey over Hong Kong to go have a freedom. We all have a job. We all have what we work. I'm asking a question. I'm asking a question like, are you concerned with your personal journey right now? Is that what you only concerned right now?
I'm interested in doing business.
Yeah, okay, so it's your first business journey.
Hong Kong is actually making it very difficult for the global economy to actually do business through Hong Kong.
Yeah.
It's actually making China now very bad because of the activities of people like yourselves.
Yeah.
Why? I do all my business in China.
And you are
I don't need Hong Kong. Just to answer my question, who in Hong Kong is supposedly corrupt? Because I mean, you've got the perfect opportunity with all the cameras running to actually name names. Name the names. Who are the people? Who are the people? No. I actually think the Hong Kong police have actually been very, very restrained with what they've actually done, given what I've actually seen on the TV with actually bricks and Molotov cocktails. I'm very thankful at the moment. There's only the Hong Kong police, and they're very, very restrained from what I'm actually seeing.
Well, the shutdown of the airport has affected international passengers and the local economy. As one of the busiest transport hubs in the world, the Hong Kong International Airport handles over 70 million passengers every year. More than 70,000 residents work at the airport and 800,000 people are closely tied to the industrial chains that rely on the airport's operations. Trade and logistics are the city's pillar industries. A one-day paralysis means at least 200,000 fewer passengers and a drop in cargo goods of some 13,000 tons. The airport administration itself loses 20 million Hong Kong dollars a day. To other news now, the Sahel is experiencing a serious security strain and the situation is particularly volatile in Mali. Militant groups continue to threaten residents, creating a difficult environment for the joint French-Malian military force to establish structures for lasting peace.
Sandstorms, thunderstorms and villagers reluctant to speak. These were the conditions faced by hundreds of French troops and allied Malians who were searching for 50-odd militants in Mali's savannah during an operation in Goma district. Getting information out of terrified villagers has been difficult.
What caught our attention was during the first check, we discovered suspicious clues, which made us carry out a more thorough procedure to confirm whether or not the villager suspected of sharing jihadist propaganda on his phone would be a person of interest for Barkhane.
Efforts led by France to stop this region from becoming a launchpad of attacks are increasingly trapped in an endless cat-and-mouse game with well-armed militants.
There is fear. The other day, a young girl called Kaditu on the other side. At first, she would lie or not talk to us, and I told Captain Guyam to isolate her so we could question her. But she is scared of talking because she said, after we leave, people will come and kill her. They want to talk to us, but they are scared. These are the pressures that are on these people because we are not present in a definitive way. We come for one patrol and then go back. For as long as we are not here, it won't be possible. We need to be here.
This 5-year-old mission, initially planned as a short-term stopgap to hand over to local forces, may have many more years left to run.
The security situation is not easy. People are really scared of what is going on. You can see what is happening here. In fact, there is mistrust which has set in. People don't trust each other anymore. No one knows what their neighbor is capable of. So really, the situation is not easy.
The 4,500 troops deployed in this patchwork of former French colonies for Operation Barkhane face huge logistical challenges in hostile terrain. They rely on the cooperation of a civilian population spread thinly across vast and remote spaces, often either sympathetic to the militants or terrified of informing on them. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Date palm wines are popular in Sudan and North Africa. In Tunisia, locals enjoy delicately made date palm juice, often served during meals breaking the fast in the Middle East. Let's now take a look.
A producer of the Tunisian date palm beverage must have an expert hand and not be too greedy to draw the sap from the palm, or else could risk killing it. That's the delicate balance of art and craft in making the prized local brew known as legmi.
When choosing the palm tree and before making the cut, it is necessary to choose a big and mature palm tree for good quality legmi to drink and a good amount of juice extraction.
As soon as the sun is up, people in southern Tunisia rush out to buy a glass or bottle of legmi, a coveted palm date drink that is too delicate to be sold far from the oasis.
Every day I sell between 40 and 50 liters from spring until October. In November it gets colder. People want warmer things to eat and drink, so they do not want cold.
Rida Omran is in his 60s and has been harvesting the nectar for decades, since learning the technique at the age of 14 from a relative in the oasis of Nahal. He now refers to himself as the prince of the palm tree.
In the summer, legmi has its own specifications and not everyone can make it. In summer, it is fragile because of the heat. The temperature is very, very high. It is fragile, so it cannot sit in the heat because it rots and becomes vinegar.
A 1.5-liter bottle sells for just under $1, and even at its fairly priced rate and roughly bottled state, the brew is delectable.
It's our breakfast here because it's full of good sugar. It gives people energy. There are people, instead of having a croissant and coffee, have legmi instead. Legmi is good for the body.
The legmi is a palm juice. We are used to consuming it especially in the morning and sometimes even in the afternoon. I came here to buy legmi, especially because I have guests who are here for a wedding in Tunis and I want to please them with legmi.
So every harvest, Rida carefully cuts the bark, but is keen not to touch the heart of the palm tree, otherwise it dies. He harvests from each tree before letting them rest for 4 years, producing around 8,000 liters annually. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
All the business news coming up for you after the break, including Nigeria warns local banks not to enforce insurance on borrowers. And China's foreign investment hit $79 billion from January to July of this year.
Nigeria is my home. 160 million vibrant, ambitious individuals constantly seeking the perfect self-expression. It is these people who inspired me to be that person that is seen, to be a voice that is heard, and ultimately to be the anchor that I am. I have to tap in, tune in, and turn on the very best qualities within me to deliver the news. I'm Richard Nta, an anchor for CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
The Central Bank of Nigeria has warned banks not to enforce insurance on borrowers. This is to encourage financial institutions to comply with its specific requirements for loan disbursement. In Nigeria, lenders usually ask borrowers to take insurance cover to protect the loans that they plan to obtain. To make sure that consumers' capability to repay credits are efficiently assessed, the Apex Bank has now put in place new requirements which financial institutions must comply with. It's also set clear policies and procedures to ascertain that those who are unable to meet their repayment obligations due to ill health, unemployment or other disabilities are treated fairly and with due consideration. Still in Nigeria, the 6-year electricity deal signed by the country and German-based firm Siemens is expected to require more than $3.2 billion to execute. The 3-phase Nigerian electrification project aims to achieve 25,000 megawatts of electricity by 2025. It was first outlined in a meeting between Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari and German Chancellor Angela Merkel last August. For decades, Nigeria has been experiencing an energy supply crisis with only around 40% of its population connected to power. However, the latest Siemens plan is set to improve the West African country's capacity to deliver electricity across its value chain. Let's move to housing in Africa now. And according to Pan-African housing development financier Shelter Afrique, Africa needs more than $1.4 trillion in funding to be able to effectively address the growing housing crisis. The firm says a majority of African countries are already facing a housing crisis as a result of high population growth, increased urbanization, poor urban planning and dysfunctional land markets, among other issues. Shelter Afrique has signed a memorandum of understanding with Habitat for Humanity International. The MOU will see Habitat for Humanity International assist Shelter Afrique in mobilizing capital for affordable housing. In Kenya, Kisumu, in the western part of the country, has undergone rapid growth in terms of infrastructure. In just under 10 years, the lakeside city has seen an increase in highways and bridges that have extensively transformed its status. Now, in conjunction with the national government, local authorities are set to commission its reconstructed port that has otherwise been dormant for the last 20 years. CGTN's Terry Wangari deciphers what this could mean for residents in the Greater Lake Victoria Basin.
Kisumu City is on track in commissioning its newly rehabilitated port, which is situated on Lake Victoria in the western region of Kenya. The port has been underutilized for years, despite its immense potential and strategic positioning to serve the landlocked countries in the Great Lakes region. This has been blamed on the invasion of hyacinth, which is a weed that grows uncontrollably in the lake, a poor transport system, and the state of its landing sites. In 2017, the Kenyan government signed an agreement with China Exim Bank for a $140 million loan to finance its construction. The newly refurbished port is also the county government's plan to rearrange the city's geological structure to favor economic activity.
There's one unfortunate thing that Kisumu as a city, or as a town for that matter, where it started, grew with its back to the lake. If you look at the shops in front of the lake on Obote Road, they turn their backs to the lake, which is very unfortunate because in most towns or cities on waterfronts, facilities always turn their front to the lake and then interact with the lakefront economy to their own advantage.
In its heyday, the Kisumu port was an important passenger and cargo hub. It interlinked Kenya, Uganda and Tanzania through the Port Bell, Jinja, Bukoba and Mwanza ports. Uganda, which is the main user of the port, accounts for more than 90% of cargo due to its landlocked nature. With its recent reconstruction, the port hopes to revive trade and economic ties within the Lake Victoria Basin.
Kenya Pipeline Company has built a jetty on the other side of the lake, not on this side, near the airport, past the KPC depot there. And that jetty is going to put petroleum products into tankers and ships destined for points around the lake in Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, and so on. And so that is for bringing in revenue.
So the lakefront development on the side of Kisumu aims at improving all the infrastructure around this other side, so that marine transport or marine transport, which is envisaged, can be possible. Yeah, and at the same time, it will not just be marine; it will also be the transports, passengers moving from Kisumu within East Africa and within Kenya.
The current export tonnage at Kisumu port stands at 21,000 tons. Once the revamped port is commissioned, the Kenya Ports Authority expects this figure to grow to up to 410,000 tons monthly by 2035. Terry Wangari, CGTN, Kisumu, Kenya.
To food matters now, and over the past few years, Uganda has been experiencing a remarkable rice boom. It's supported by good farming practices, premium market prices and favourable policies that have stimulated large private investment in the rice sector. The East African country is currently attracting attention as a potential rice basket for East Africa, contributing to greater food security and a reduction in rice imports. CT10's Daniel Arakmoy brings us more.
Africa consumes a total of 11.6 million tons of milled rice per year, of which 3.3 million tons are imported. According to officials, as many as 21 of the 39 rice-producing countries in Africa import between 50 and 99% of their rice requirements. Uganda is now concentrating on local farmers to boost rice production in all regions, including the planting of new variety of drought-resistant upland rice. Jimmy Lamore is a rice breeder at Uganda's National Agricultural Research Organization. He is one of the scientists who developed Uganda's new rice varieties that grow in soils with less nutrients and no fertilizer use.
We have developed varieties that are drought tolerant, and they take a shorter time. So in case rain tails very fast, you still get your crop from the field.
The focus has now shifted from increasing rice production to improving post-harvest handling, value addition and marketing.
Government is going to build more irrigation schemes, and I think that will be also positive in terms of rice production. So I think we're hopeful that in the next 2-3 years we shall be able to double our production.
According to data by the Ministry of Agriculture, Uganda exports 40,000 to 50,000 metric tons of rice to South Sudan, DR Congo, Kenya and some Middle Eastern countries. Daniel Arakmoy, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Despite uncertainty in global markets due to the China-US trade war, overseas investment into China remains strong this year. Let's take a look.
China is still attractive to overseas investors. Latest government data shows China received $79 billion of investments from overseas in the first 7 months of the year, an increase of nearly 4% compared with the same period a year ago.
High-tech sectors saw significant growth. Aircraft and spacecraft equipment, electronics, telecommunication equipment, and medicine received over 30% more of overseas investment compared to the same period of last year. Foreign investment in high-tech services also grew more than 60%.
The China-US trade war is taking its toll. A survey by the American Chamber of Commerce in China shows that 65% of its member companies are concerned about the trade tension and are tempering their business strategies accordingly. Amid this, however, government data shows China is enjoying optimistic growth in foreign investment.
Investment from China's major source of foreign capitals is not slowing down. Investment from Germany and South Korea has increased about 70%.
Businesses are on edge as long as the trade dispute remains unresolved. But amid all that, the same survey from the American Chamber of Commerce shows 62% of companies still see China as one of their top 3 global investment priorities. Rob Rashke, CGTN.
We are going to a short break now. Don't go away. Lots more to come, including South African brands shine at UK fashion show.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
South African designers took centre stage at the recently held Africa Fashion Week, London. The event is foremost on the calendar in London for those seeking inspiration from the African continent.
In its 9th year now, Africa Fashion Week London has grown to give young and small African designers an international platform for their work. South Africa's Lunga Ntuli and Gugu Bengu were some of the talents who stole this year's show with their vibrant creations.
We want to dominate Africa. We want to tell the African stories. We want to tell the story of Ubuntu. We want to tell the story of Utando throughout the world. So we are saying, we are Ellen Watches. We are coming from the little area called the Tembeni, but we are building a brand that is going to outlive us, that is going to be big, that is going to dominate in Africa and in the entire globe.
Wow, everybody asking about the shoes. And I'm the only one who got these shoes. I think the whole of London. So these shoes are so good and the quality is so good. And it's a South African shoes, actually it's 100% handmade.
The event also featured a range of stalls selling African jewelry, bags, clothes from Cape Verde to Nigeria.
It would be good if there was some Pan-African collaboration, you know, from different African countries coming together. Even the West as well, you know, collaborating with some of the, the Western designers collaborating with some of the African designers, not just taking our designs and making it look like it was theirs, you know. Instead of saying inspired by Africa, they can actually collaborate with some of the African designers.
Ademiliu has plans to expand the brand further with an African Fashion Week Dubai in October and further shows in the US cities. Chamhono, CGTN.
Here in Kenya, there are more than 6 million people living with disabilities. Most have limited opportunities for accessing education. But one man, a father of a child living with a disability, is fighting to change this. Stanley offers free daily transport to physically impaired children in his community to help them go to school. CGTN's Chao Ngono has more.
Stanley Mutanya is keen to see these children board his vehicle. This would not have been possible had the children opted for public transport, as they do not have the reasonable accommodations that children with special needs require. And this is what motivates Stanley to drive these children to school at no cost for close to 2 years now.
I stopped working as a driver when my child fell ill. Soon after starting taking her to school, I realized there were more parents who needed to take their children to school but lacked transport. I have around 33 children whom I take to school.
Schools for children with special needs are also limited and located far away from most communities where they are needed most.
The center was established in 2007 in order to support children with special needs, majority of them coming from Kibera slum. We started with about 6 children. Currently we have about 71 children at the center. We support them through appropriate intervention measure, which include the therapy service. We have basic learning skills. We have empowerment program and advocacy.
The Mary Rice Center is just one of the few institutions offering education to this special group. The Kenyan government is keen to expand inclusive education in schools across the country.
What we have done is to try and, as much as possible, to make sure that most of them access education in an equal measure or even better measure. Another measure that we had actually put in place is to make sure that there is adaptable exam. Somebody with disability may have lost their hand. So their handwriting are bigger and they are slower in writing. So we give them enough time and we give them enough space to be able to answer questions, not like any other normal student.
But not every child is privileged. There are other obstacles that hinder them from obtaining any formal education.
In fact, the problem we have in Kenya first and foremost is cultural beliefs. And I have told you, a child with disability, first of all, you start by blaming parents, that there is something they did wrong, that is why they have given birth, and that's why they are referred as a curse, literally. So they are hidden. And when you are hidden, meaning you will not be seen in public. Schools are public. So education-wise, you will not be taken to school so that people don't know that this family is a caste family.
So far, progress has been made in removing discriminatory barriers and changing attitudes in the environment. But thousands of disabled children cannot access education. For this group, though, they are certain that Stanley will continue to pick them up and drive them to school. Chamgono, CGTN.
We have all the sports news coming up for you after the break, including